All right, Gerald, nice to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Can you briefly introduce yourself and your fund?
Yes. So my name's Gerald. Born and raised Malaysian. Eventually went to the US for university. Ended up spending my whole career in venture, initially in an institutional fund in New York. More recently, for the past 3 years, at a German bank, Deutsche Bank, so helping out with the CVC team out of New York office as well. So was on the team since day one, since the formation of CVC at Deutsche, and been looking at enterprise as investments across the globe. Until I came back to Asia very recently, in June of this year. Currently at a regional Asian firm called Gobi Parters, where we have pretty much established a presence in most Asian countries today, and slowly moving westwards towards the Middle East. So we currently run a handful of funds out of the KL office. Currently dual HQ in both Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia and Hong Kong. So we also have a counterpart team in Hong Kong today.
Okay, so we can call you like a kind of fund guy.
Yes. So maybe a little fun story about Gobi is, so our founding partner is Thomas. Thomas, actually an American, came to Asia in the late 90s during the financial crisis. And we started Gobi initially in Shanghai in 2002, so soon after the burst of the dot-com bubble. We called Shanghai our home for a bit, and then eventually we moved our HQ to Hong Kong. So we've been around for about 2 decades, and in 2015, Tom brought his family, and we came to KL in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and that's where our second HQ is today. So we've been in the Southeast Asian region for coming to 10 years today, so slightly over 9. We've pretty much, in some sense, planted our roots in the region, have a presence in pretty much most countries, and planted a flag in pretty much most countries in Southeast Asia. So everything from southward, from Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines. And now that we're fortifying our presence in Asia, we also have a team in Hong Kong. We have a Korean partner. In Seoul as well, we have some LPs from Japan. We're slowly moving westward, but not through the Pacific Ocean, through mainland. So we're now in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Egypt, as well as in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, so I guess you're working with so many countries and like many founders from different world. You said earlier that it's your second time in Korea, right? Third?
Second time for work, third time if you include the first fund trip. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you travel between back and forth, Korea and other countries, what's the biggest difference in terms of like culture or whatever, like in business wise?
Yeah, in terms of culture, I think compared to Asia in general, Korea is equally friendly, if not more friendly. Obviously slightly different from the West, from the US or its counterparts. But I think something that I realized very interesting about Korea is there is a lot of excitement in the VC space, not just in the private sector, but also from the government as well. So we're starting to see a lot of programs and events bringing global investors to Korea.
Right.
There's a lot of institutions that sort of work with startups in Korea and showcasing them to global investors. So when I was in New York, there was a delegation that comes to New York all the time.
From Korea?
From Korea.
Okay.
And so we will host them in Deutsche. And now that I'm in Korea, we will also sometimes look at similar stuff. So I think this collaboration and synergy is very exciting, especially in Korea, which I see a lot more compared to other Asian countries. So it's a very exciting place to be.
Okay, so you see Korea as a kind of dynamic and all the kind of synergies.
Yes, there's a lot of energy in venture in Korea.
A lot of energy. Okay. Yeah. What make you the most excited when you see like Korean players, Korean founders or Korean investors?
Yes, that's a really good question. So when I first came back from the States, a lot of people asked me the same question, like, what is so exciting about Asia? And my perspective is always, I think in this side of the world, the way children and we are brought up, we spend a lot of time in sciences, in the hard sciences, right, in bio and physics. We spend less time in software engineering, which is why in some sense we always see less software companies coming out of this side of the world. But now that the world has kind of shifted, right, we spend, I think Asia has pretty much unanimously became the factory of the world.
Right.
We see a lot of exciting progress in manufacturing, in what I like to call supposedly not so sexy industries, right? Like in manufacturing and logistics,
Right.
In consumer stuff, right? So we already see headwind in semiconductor, right?
Right.
The initial technology might come from the West, but fabrication is done here in Asia, in Korea by Samsung, right? In TSMC, but in Taiwan. And the same goes to battery tech. A lot of production, a lot of manufacturers of raw components of battery itself, is in this side of the world, is in Korea, right? So this time now I'm back, I'm starting to see a lot of movement in the venture space, building in these hard sciences spaces, where their clients are all these huge conglomerates that have been doing manufacturing for the longest time, right?
Right.
And the flywheel is, these conglomerates are a client of these startups. At the same time, they are also the investors that back these startups. And so we see a lot of, synergy in product selling, in partnership, in funding. And I think this is something that Asia is really good with, especially in Korea, where the US counterparts at this point in time seems to be lacking slightly, at least in these specific industries.
So overall, like including Korea, like Asian countries, kind of easy to shift their initiatives and move really fast.
Yeah, yeah. And even when I was in the US, pretty much every huge conglomerate in Asia has a venture team.
Oh.
And they may have started in the US, but a lot of times we see a lot of excitement here in this side of the world as well, and we start seeing capital coming back and reinvesting in companies that are building frontier tech that their conglomerates could utilize. So counterintuitively, I think these new generations of corporates coming out of Asia are actually moving really quickly. And you can also see this in the news, right? You see the development of solid-state battery, and you see Hyundai on it, you see sort of Samsung on it, you see a lot of different companies working with very, very frontier tech. And if you were to think about it, like maybe in the past 20 years, like 20 years ago, corporate might be hesitant to do that.
Right.
But we start seeing, this is what, when I was at the CVC at Deutsche, this is sort of what we're always saying, we sort of outsource our innovation to great founders who are building in the startup space. And when there's strategic alignment, we tend to bring them in. And in the process, we provide them funding, we provide them with the resources that the corporate has. So I think that's a very good synergy that's happening in Korea today.
Okay, so then let's move on to kind of a little bit casual question. Have you find kind of interesting people or interesting person in the Fosterbridge?
In Fosterbridge, yes.
Like except for me.
Yeah, so what's the surprising thing? So when I first arrived at the event earlier, I was sitting on a table, I realized that the world is a lot closer today than it was. In some sense, everyone is only like 1 or 2 hops away. So I actually met an ex-Gobi person who's running a fund in Thailand now, and also meeting sort of like other interesting folks in the region. So a lot of really exciting conversation. And I think one thing that we do really well in Asia is we tend to connect first as people, and then the business comes after. Right? In the US, things could be a little more transactional. And I think the affinity being Asian and sort of being together really sort of drives the whole sort of like energy together.
So I guess because of time, I think we need to wrap it up. So like any advice or any tips for founders or entrepreneurs or even your like colleagues in Gobi Partners?
Yeah, there's a very interesting take. Someone was asking me this earlier. I think as we look at venture in Asia today, we need to look at it with a different perspective, not a plug and play from what we saw in the West. I think in Asia itself, especially advice for founders, and that's kind of what we see a lot on the ground today. Like for venture, it's always exciting and always encouraged for founders to think outside of their home country. So you may start from Korea, building and proving your tech in Korea, but there's so many sort of culturally similar adjacent countries that will very happily be a client, and sometimes your target audience might be outside of Korea. So I always encourage founders to not just think about your home country, but expanding into the greater region, greater Asia region. And I think that's really one of the tenets of Gobi's thesis today. So fostering bridges in Asia.
So you want to say to founders and entrepreneurs and startups like just get out.
Yes.
Get out where you are.
Do well in your home country, and then get out
Okay.
and explore outside as well. Yeah.
Okay.
And not just the US, but
Okay.
the adjacent
Anywhere
Asian
outside of your
countries.
house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, nice point and a nice interview today,
Yeah.
Jared. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.